research that is looking at structures that are underneath the bottom of the pyramid. And incredibly controversial, very fascinating, and if it's accurate, it essentially rewrites all of human history.
We've stared at the Giza Plateau as the ultimate monument to human heights for thousands of years, but we've been looking in the wrong direction. What if the Great Pyramids aren't the main event, but merely the rooftop of a structure that stretches miles into the bedrock? New AI-driven 3D scans have peeled back the limestone, revealing a sprawling, multi-layered subterranean complex that challenges everything we know about ancient engineering.
Italian and Scottish researchers, mainly from the University of Pisa, conducted advanced high-frequency radar mapping under Egypt's famous pyramids.
This isn't just a discovery, it's a logistical nightmare. The Sayar Revolution. When we talk about archaeology, we usually imagine brushes, trowels, and decades of painstakingly slow digging under a blistering sun. But the game changed in late 2024 and early 2025. A team of researchers, primarily led by Professor Corrado Malanga and Filippo Biondi, decided that if we wanted to find the next great secret of the Giza Plateau, we had to stop looking at the surface and start looking through it. This wasn't about finding a hidden tomb or a forgotten sarcophagus. It was about a complete shift in how we perceive the geological reality of Egypt. They utilized a technology that was originally designed for military surveillance and environmental monitoring, satellite synthetic aperture radar, or SAR. For the first time, we weren't just guessing based on local legends or historical accounts. We were using high-frequency electromagnetic pulses bounced off the Earth's surface from space to map the density of the world beneath our feet. The Giza Plateau is a massive limestone shelf, a natural foundation that has supported the weight of the Great Pyramids for millennia. For over a century, the consensus in Egyptology has been that while there are certainly tunnels and shafts, like the famous Osiris shaft, or the narrow passageways inside the Great Pyramid itself, the plateau is largely a solid block of stone. The SAR data, however, began to paint a very different and much more complex picture. As the AI algorithms processed the radar backscatter, they started to filter out the noise of the surface sand and the solid rock layers. What remained was a series of anomalies that were far too geometric to be natural fissures or underground aquifers. We are talking about massive, cavernous voids arranged in a deliberate, repeating pattern that suggests a level of urban planning beneath the bedrock. The revolution here isn't just the discovery, but the scale. Previous ground-penetrating radar, GPR, could only see maybe 30 or 40 feet down on a good day, depending on the soil composition. SAR Doppler tomography, however, uses the slight variations in the satellite's orbit and the rotation of the Earth to create a synthetic aperture that is kilometers wide, allowing it to penetrate much deeper, reportedly up to 2 kilometers into the crust. When the first 3D renders started popping up on the researchers' screens, the atmosphere in the lab shifted from curiosity to genuine shock. They weren't looking at a few isolated caves, they were looking at an architectural footprint that seemed to mirror the complexity of a modern city. The data suggested an infrastructure of immense proportions, hidden away from the light of day for perhaps 10,000 years or more. This is where the revolution turns into a scientific battleground. If these scans are accurate, it means the Giza Plateau is essentially a hollowed-out honeycomb of engineered spaces. This challenges the very timeline of human civilization. We've always been told that the 4th dynasty Egyptians were the masters of stone, but the sheer volume of material that would need to be removed to create these subterranean halls is staggering. It suggests a phase of construction that preceded the pyramids themselves, a phase 0 of Giza that we are only now beginning to comprehend. The SAR revolution has effectively turned the plateau into a transparent map. But the deeper we look, the more we realize that the Great Pyramid might just be the tip of a very deep, very silent iceberg. But how do you see through 2 kilometers of solid rock without moving a single grain of sand? The tech, synthetic aperture radar, and AI. Let's now look at the tools that made it possible. We aren't talking about a high-end metal detector or the kind of ground-penetrating radar, GPR, You see archaeologists pushing across a site like a lawnmower. Those tools are limited by the physical properties of the soil. Once you hit a certain density of limestone, the signal simply dies. To go deeper, much deeper, the research team turned to the heavens, specifically to the Italian Cosmo SkyMed satellite constellation. This is where synthetic aperture radar, SAR, enters the frame, a technology originally designed for high-altitude military surveillance and tracking moving targets through thick cloud cover or total darkness. The magic of SAR lies in the synthetic part of its name. A physical antenna on a satellite is relatively small, which normally limits its resolution. However, as the satellite orbits the Earth, it fires a continuous stream of microwave pulses at the target area from different positions. By combining all those reflections, the system simulates or synthesizes an antenna that is effectively kilometers long. This massive virtual lens allows for a level of detail that is frankly staggering. But the Giza team took it a step further by employing SAR Doppler tomography. Instead of just looking at the surface reflection, they analyzed the phase of the returning waves. By measuring how the waves were delayed or shifted as they passed through different densities of material, they could start to build a three-dimensional slice of what lies beneath the plateau. This is where the heavy lifting began for the artificial intelligence. Raw SAR data is, to the human eye, an incomprehensible blizzard of digital static and noise. There are reflections from the sand, the casing stones of the pyramids, the surrounding city of Giza, and the natural geological faults within the limestone itself. To find a city in that mess, the researchers deployed a custom-built AI neural network designed for blind source separation. The AI's job was to interrogate the data, separating natural geological features, like jagged cracks or water-eroded caverns, from anything displaying anthropogenic or man-made characteristics. We're talking about right angles, perfectly parallel lines, and repeating geometric volumes. The AI didn't just clean up the image, it performed a 3D tomographic reconstruction, effectively treating the Giza Plateau like a patient in a CAT scan. It mapped the velocity of the radar waves as they traveled through the stone. In areas where the stone was solid, the waves moved at a predictable speed. But when the waves hit a void, the speed changed. By correlating millions of these data points, the AI began to extrapolate the boundaries of massive, hollowed-out spaces. The software wasn't just guessing, it was identifying high-probability zones where the density of the Earth dropped to near zero, indicating air-filled chambers. What makes this specific AI application so bad for traditional archaeology is its objectivity. The algorithm doesn't care about the history books or the established timelines of the Old Kingdom. It simply reports the mathematical reality of the subsurface. It identified a series of anomalies that are so massive and so deep that they defy any known natural geological process for this region. We are looking at a digital X-ray of the Earth's crust that suggests the Giza Plateau isn't a solid block of stone, but a hollowed-out megalithic machine. The AI processed petabytes of data to reveal that the bedrock under the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid is riddled with non-natural geometry. The results didn't just show a few cracks, they revealed a blueprint that shouldn't exist. These scans showed a level of subterranean infrastructure that looks less like a series of burial chambers and more like a high-tech facility or a deep-crust bunker system. The tech has essentially turned the impenetrable Giza Plateau into a transparent 3D model, and the structures it's flagging are located at depths where we previously believed nothing but solid rock resided. And these shafts weren't leading to dead ends, they were the highways to something much larger. The 8 vertical shafts. When the SAR data was finally processed into a 3D tomographic model, the first things that jumped out at the researchers weren't horizontal rooms, but vertical anomalies. The AI identified 8 distinct cylindrical structures, massive shafts plunging straight down into the bedrock. We're not talking about small, hand-dug wells or narrow air vents. These are colossal vertical pipes, approximately 20 meters in diameter, extending to a staggering depth of 648 meters. To put that in perspective, that's over 2,100 feet. You could stack 2 Eiffel Towers on top of each other inside one of these shafts and still have room for a few apartment buildings. But it's not just the depth that has everyone talking, it's the architecture of the descent. The scans revealed what appears to be a continuous, descending spiral pathway encircling the interior of each shaft. Think of it like a giant stone version of a double helix or a multi-story parking garage ramp, but carved directly out of the primary limestone of the Giza Plateau. These aren't just holes in the ground. They are sophisticated transit systems designed for moving massive amounts of weight or perhaps water between the surface and the deep subterranean layers. The precision required to spiral a walkway down 2,000 feet into solid rock, maintaining a consistent grade and structural integrity, is a feat that would challenge even 21st century tunneling equipment. What makes this discovery unpleasant for the traditional history books is the sheer logistics of the excavation. If these 8 shafts are real, the amount of limestone removed just to create the vertical voids would be enough to build several smaller pyramids. And yet, there is no massive spoil heap of rubble on the surface to account for this. This suggests that the shafts weren't just dug out, they were engineered as part of a much larger integrated system. The SAR images show these 8 wells arranged in 2 parallel rows of 4, oriented perfectly along a north-south axis. This isn't a random collection of caves, it's a grid. It's a deliberate, high-precision layout that mimics the geometric obsession we see in the pyramids themselves, but on a scale that is effectively invisible from the surface. As the team looked closer at the 3D renders, they noticed that these spiral pathways don't just stop. They seem to connect to a series of horizontal levels located at different intervals. It's as if the Giza Plateau is a giant skyscraper built in reverse, reaching deep into the Earth's crust rather than up into the sky. The AI's density maps suggest that these shafts acted as the central arteries for a vast network of corridors. For decades, we've wondered why the well shaft inside the Great Pyramid was so strangely shaped, or why it led into a subterranean chamber that looks unfinished. If the Italian-Scottish team is right, those known shafts are just the basement windows of a structure that goes 10 times deeper than we ever dared to look. The geometric perfection of these cylinders is what really unnerves the engineering community. In nature, vertical holes are usually the result of water erosion or volcanic activity, and they are almost never perfectly round or arranged in a grid. These shafts, however, appear to be carved with a mathematical regularity that suggests the use of advanced boring technology. We are looking at a subterranean highway system that descends nearly half a mile into the Earth. This raises a terrifying question for archaeologists. Who had the power to hollow out the world's most famous plateau? And why was it necessary to go that deep? The scale is so immense that it forces us to reconsider the entire purpose of the Giza complex. We've always assumed the pyramids were the final destination, the crown jewels of the site. But with 8 vertical highways reaching 2,100 feet down, the pyramids start to look like nothing more than the surface-level ventilation caps or power terminals for a much larger engine buried in the dark. The shafts are the smoking gun of an industrial-scale operation that has been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years. And as impressive as these shafts are, they were just the entry point. The scans show that at the very bottom of these 600-meter drops, the geometry shifts from circles to something far more imposing. The cubes, subterranean megastructures. As the AI algorithms processed the data from the deepest layers of the SAR tomography, 2 massive, distinct anomalies began to take shape. These aren't just rooms or chambers in the traditional sense. The researchers have dubbed them the cubes. We are talking about 2 colossal, perfectly rectilinear structures, each measuring roughly 80 meters on a side. To visualize that, imagine 2 25-story skyscrapers, each as wide as a football field, buried nearly half a mile beneath the Great Pyramid of Khufu. The sheer volume of these cubes is what makes this discovery so unexpected for our current understanding of history. If these are hollow, man-made spaces, the displacement of rock required to create them is almost unfathomable. One of these cubes alone has a volume that rivals the internal capacity of the Great Pyramid itself. yet it's tucked away in the high-pressure environment of the deep crust. The SAR data suggests that these structures aren't just empty voids. They possess internal density variations that indicate a complex, subdivided interior. The AI's heat map of the stone's resistance shows what looks like internal walls, floors, and perhaps even massive machinery or storage vats. The placement of these cubes is equally disturbing. They aren't just tossed into the bedrock at random. They are positioned with a mathematical relationship to the three pyramids on the surface, acting as a sort of underground reflection of the Giza layout. While the pyramids reach for the stars, these cubes anchor the plateau into the earth. This symmetry suggests a unified master plan, a blueprint that spans from the tip of the Great Pyramid's pyramidion down to the foundation of these subterranean monoliths. It's a level of interconnectedness that implies the entire Giza Plateau is a single integrated machine, with the surface structures serving as the visible interface for a much larger, hidden engine. But why build cubes? In architecture, the cube is the ultimate shape for structural integrity under pressure. At a depth of 600 meters, the weight of the limestone above is immense. A natural cavern would likely collapse or be rounded by geological forces over eons. But these structures maintain sharp 90-degree angles according to the radar returns. This suggests they were either lined with a material much stronger than the surrounding limestone or engineered with a sophisticated understanding of load-bearing physics that we didn't think existed thousands of years ago. The researchers noted that the walls of these cubes appear to be incredibly smooth, reflecting the SAR pulses with a consistency that usually indicates polished stone or metallic surfaces. The proximity of these cubes to the 8 vertical shafts suggests they functioned as the hubs of this underground city. If the shafts are the elevators, these cubes are the terminals. What were they used for? Without physical excavation, we can only look at the data, which points toward a massive industrial or archival purpose. Some have suggested they could be deep-crust shelters, designed to withstand a global cataclysm on the surface. Others look at the geometric alignment and wonder if they were part of a massive subterranean water management system, using the pressure of the deep earth to move resources. Whatever they are, they represent a leap in engineering that makes the construction of the pyramids look like a preliminary sketch. If these are man-made, the timeline of human engineering just hit a massive, high-speed wall. We are forced to ask, how did a civilization with supposedly copper chisels and wooden sleds hollow out millions of tons of bedrock to create perfect geometric cubes at the depth of a modern gold mine? The city beneath Giza isn't just a collection of tunnels. It's a high-density, high-precision megastructure that challenges the very definition of ancient. The data is screaming at us that there is a second, much older Giza buried beneath the one we take pictures of every day. But as with any discovery that threatens to rewrite the textbooks, the awful news isn't just about the mystery. It's about the fierce resistance from the scientific establishment. Is it a revolution in archaeology or a massive misinterpretation of data noise? The scientific pushback. This is where the story shifts from a high-tech wonder to a gritty, high-stakes academic standoff. The news isn't just about the potential implications for our history books. It's about the fierce, almost allergic reaction from the traditional scientific establishment. To understand why this discovery is considered unexpected by many, you have to understand the gatekeepers of Giza. Figures like Dr. Zahi Hawass and the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities have spent decades cultivating a very specific, well-documented narrative of the Old Kingdom. To them, the Italian-Scottish team's SAR data isn't a breakthrough, it's a digital phantom. The primary criticism comes down to the physics of radar. Critics like Lawrence Conyers, a pioneer in ground-penetrating radar, GPR, have pointed out that electromagnetic waves have a natural enemy: physical density and moisture. They argue that claiming a satellite-based radar can see through 2 kilometers of solid, mineral-rich limestone to find perfect 80-meter cubes is a scientific impossibility. In their view, what the AI is identifying as shafts and cities is actually nothing more than clutter or ringing, a phenomenon where radar waves bounce around inside natural geological layers, creating ghostly, geometric reflections that aren't actually there. To the skeptics, the city is just a software glitch magnified by wishful thinking. But the pushback goes deeper than just technical specs. There is a bad administrative reality here. The Giza Plateau is the most protected archaeological site on Earth. To suggest there is a massive infrastructure project buried half a mile down implies that a century of excavations has barely scratched the surface. It suggests that the authorities on the subject have been missing 90% of the site's true volume. This creates a massive friction point. If the SAR data is correct, it means we need to stop digging with brushes and start drilling with industrial rigs, an idea that is anathema to traditional conservationists. The thing is that even if the city is there, we may never be allowed to prove it. Furthermore, there is the noise problem. The Giza area is heavily urbanized. It sits right on the edge of Cairo, a city of 20 million people. The ground is saturated with modern electromagnetic interference, vibration from traffic, and underground utilities. Critics argue that the Italian-Scottish team's AI might be hallucinating patterns in this chaotic data environment. They suggest that the 8 vertical shafts could simply be natural vertical solution pipes, geological features common in limestone that the AI has smoothed out into perfect cylinders. This is the danger of relying on black box algorithms. If the AI is programmed to find geometry, it will find geometry, even in the random jaggedness of a cave wall. However, the researchers counter that their SAR Doppler tomography is specifically designed to filter out this surface noise. They argue that the consistency of the geometric returns, the way the cubes align perfectly with the cardinal points and the pyramids above, is mathematically impossible to attribute to random geological chance. They point out that the velocity of the radar return through these anomalies matches the signature of air-filled or low-density spaces, not solid rock or water-filled cracks. The standoff is total. One side sees a digital mirage, while the other sees the most significant architectural discovery in human history. The not-so-good part of this conflict is the stalemate. Without ground truthing, which means actually drilling a core sample down to those depths, the SAR data remains in a scientific limbo. The authorities are hesitant to grant drilling permits based on radar scans that many experts don't believe in, yet without those permits, the scans can never be verified. We are stuck in a loop where the most revolutionary evidence is dismissed as a technical error, while the physical site remains a no-fly zone for deep crust exploration. It's a battle between the old guard of the shovel and the new guard of the satellite. And for now, the secret of the underground city remains locked behind a wall of bureaucratic and scientific skepticism. But the SAR team isn't alone in their claims that the plateau is hollow. While the radar debates rage on, another much more cosmic form of evidence has been quietly gathering data from the stars. Is it possible that particles from deep space are the key to settling the argument? The muon corroboration, cosmic ray evidence. The particles from space agree the stone is not as solid as we thought. While the SAR radar teams and the traditional archaeologists are locked in a digital trench war, another group of scientists has been bypasses the surface noise entirely by looking to the stars. This is the realm of muon tomography, the backbone of the International Scan Pyramids mission and the more recent ultra-high-definition Exploring the Great Pyramid (EGP) project. If SAR term is like a sonar ping, muon tomography is a cosmic X-ray. It relies on muons, subatomic particles created when cosmic rays hit our atmosphere, which rain down on the Giza Plateau at nearly the speed of light. Muons can pass through hundreds of meters of solid rock, but they are gradually absorbed or deflected by dense material. By placing sensitive film or electronic detectors inside and around the pyramids, scientists can count how many muons make it through. If they see a higher than expected concentration of particles in a specific spot, it means the muons hit a pocket of air instead of stone. Between 2023 and 2025, this technology has delivered a series of gut punches to the idea of a solid Giza. First came the confirmation of the Big Void, a space the size of a 200-seat passenger jet hovering above the Grand Gallery. Then, in early 2025, they confirmed the North Face Corridor, a 30-foot-long hidden passage that had been sealed for 4,500 years. What makes this bad for the skeptics is that muon data is incredibly hard to argue with. Unlike radar, which can be plagued by ghost reflections, muon counting is a matter of straightforward particle physics. If the muons are getting through, the space is there, period. While the SAR scans are claiming to see much deeper, down to that 600-meter city level, the muon findings are providing the near-surface proof that Giza is riddled with intentional, hidden voids. In late 2025, the Scan Pyramids team even identified 2 new air-filled anomalies behind the eastern face of the Menkora Pyramid. It's becoming increasingly clear that the more sensitive our cosmic eyes become, the more the solid rock of Giza begins to look like a Swiss cheese of engineered chambers. The EGP mission, which launched its next phase in 2024, is currently deploying telescopes that are 100 times more sensitive than anything used before. Their goal isn't just to find more rooms, but to produce a true, high-resolution 3D tomographic map of the entire internal volume of the Great Pyramid and the bedrock directly beneath it. This is the bridge between the two camps. If the EGP's muon telescopes start to pick up the top of those 8 vertical shafts, or the upper edges of the cubes, the underground city theory moves from a fringe SAR claim to an undeniable physical reality. Even Dr. Zahi Hawass, traditionally the loudest skeptic, has hinted that a major revelation is coming in 2026 based on this new wave of multimodal scanning. The terrible news for those who want a simple history is that we are no longer looking for a single hidden tomb. We are looking at a trend. The muon data shows that every time we look at Giza with better technology, we find more emptiness where there should be stone. This corroboration suggests that the Italian-Scottish SAR team might not be hallucinating those deeper structures after all. They might just be the first ones to use a lens powerful enough to see the bottom of the map. The cosmic rays are acting as a silent witness, testifying that the ancients were obsessed with hollowing out the earth. The scale of these voids, from the 30-foot corridors to the plane-sized big void, forces us to look at the industrial reality of what it would take to build such a site. We're looking at an infrastructure project that rivals the pyramids themselves, just mirrored into the ground. The logistics of the impossible. Here is where the discovery turns bad for engineers. The sheer math of the excavation. If the SAR data is accurate, the volume of limestone removed to create 8 600-meter shafts and 2 80-meter cubes is roughly 10 times the total mass of the Great Pyramid. To put that in perspective, the Great Pyramid consists of about 2.3 million stone blocks. This subterranean city would have required the removal of enough bedrock to build a small mountain range, all while working in total darkness, half a mile underground. The first problem is the rubble. In traditional archaeology, you find the quarry before you find the city. But at Giza, there is no corresponding void on the surface or massive tailings pile that accounts for millions of tons of extracted limestone. This implies a level of waste management or structural recycling that we simply cannot explain. Then there is the air. At 2,000 feet deep, geothermal heat and lack of circulation make survival impossible without active ventilation. The spiral pathways in the shafts suggest a dual-purpose design, perhaps a counterflow system where cool air was drawn down one side while hot air escaped the other. Finally, there is the tooling. We are told the ancients used copper saws and sand to cut granite. But to bore a 20-meter wide cylinder 600 meters straight down into the crust requires industrial-grade torque and heat dissipation that would melt copper in minutes. This isn't just about primitive labor. It's about a lost category of heavy machinery. The logistics suggest that Giza wasn't a tomb. It was a multi-generational, deep earth mining or engineering project that operated on a scale we are only just now beginning to map. If these are man-made, the timeline of human engineering just hit a massive high-speed wall. The Giza scans present a choice: dismiss the data as a digital glitch, or accept that history is deeper than we imagined. If these 600-meter shafts and cubes are real, the pyramids are just the surface of a silent subterranean machine. The truth remains buried, waiting for the first drill. Tell us your thoughts about this discovery, and for more content just like this, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.